I traced the edge of my coffee mug with my thumb, feeling the smooth porcelain beneath my fingers, and for a moment, I let myself enjoy the quiet. My office smells faintly of leather and jasmine candles, the city skyline stretching beyond the window like a promise I made to myself years ago. No one outside these walls knows the truth. I'm not just any portfolio manager. I'm the one who holds the reins to the very investments that once dictated my fate. My phone buzzes sharply on the glass desk. I glance at it, expecting another routine notification, but it's him, my old boss, the man who fired me 3 years ago with barely a glance. His name flashes across the screen, and my chest tightens, a mix of memories and satisfaction washing over me. I let the call ring for a beat longer than necessary. The silk of my blouse brushes against my arm as I lean back, watching sunlight bounce off the polished floors. I remember the sting of that dismissal, the humiliation that felt like it would swallow me whole. And yet here I am, sitting in the office I built from the ground up, the very funds he once managed now under my control. I press the phone to my ear, and a small, ironic smile plays across my lips. "Hello," I say, calm and deliberate. And in that single word, every unspoken victory, every sleepless night, every quiet battle fought alone hangs between us. I still remember the day like it was etched in fire. I was 26, fresh out of graduate school, brimming with ideas that I thought were brilliant, walking into that sleek corporate office with my heart pounding in my chest. I'd admired him, respected him, maybe too much, and I believed I could make a difference there. But admiration doesn't always shield you from dismissal. He looked at me with that same cool detachment I'd seen in his emails, the one that made colleagues shrink in his presence. "You're too ambitious," he said, leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled, like he was savoring the moment of delivering a verdict. "This isn't the place for someone who thinks she can rewrite the rules." I felt my stomach drop, my hands trembling, a lump forming in my throat that made it hard to speak. I wanted to argue, to defend my work, to make him see my vision, but the words caught somewhere between pride and disbelief. I was dismissed, not for incompetence, not for failure, but for being too much of myself. Walking out of that office, clutching my empty briefcase, I felt exposed, raw, like the world had stripped me of a part of my identity. And yet, amid that humiliation, there was a small spark, a stubborn refusal to let this define me. That spark came with a gift, in the form of a small, worn notebook my grandmother had given me years ago. She always said, "Life will try to write your story for you. Keep your own pen ready." I held that notebook close on my way home, the pages blank but full of promise, imagining every step I could take to reclaim control. By the time I stepped into my tiny apartment that evening, I had made a decision. I wouldn't just survive. I would rise, quietly, deliberately, on my own terms. Every rejection, every sneer, every dismissive glance would become fuel. And in that moment, with the city lights casting a glow across my floor, I whispered to myself, "One day, they'll see who I really am." The weeks after my firing were a blur of uncertainty, punctuated by long nights of research, calls, and self-doubt. My apartment, once a cozy refuge, became a war room. Charts, spreadsheets, and financial news scattered across every surface. I poured coffee like it was fuel for survival, the rich aroma grounding me as I traced patterns, analyzed risks, and mapped opportunities. I wasn't alone in this journey. There was someone, a mentor I'd met at a networking event just months before being fired, who believed in me when I questioned myself. Caroline Reynolds, a seasoned investor with a reputation for turning overlooked talent into leaders, offered guidance with a warmth that felt foreign at first. "Ambition isn't arrogance," she told me one evening over Zoom, the glow of her desk lamp framing her kind eyes. "It's your compass. Use it wisely." Her words became my mantra. I started small, investing cautiously, learning the delicate rhythm of risk and reward. The first profitable trade felt like a quiet victory, but one that demanded restraint. I couldn't celebrate too loudly. If the wrong person knew, it would complicate everything. My boss, my old colleagues, even family, they couldn't see me succeed yet. I needed to grow in silence. There were nights I sat hunched over my laptop, staring at fluctuating numbers, heart racing with fear and exhilaration. Mistakes happened, miscalculations that made my stomach churn, but I learned. Each error became a lesson, each small one a step toward reclaiming the life that had been stripped from me. Gradually, my reputation grew, though quietly. My first major client came after months of persistence, a woman who recognized my insight despite my modest presentation. Then came the first real investment I controlled entirely, the kind that changed the rules in my favor. And with each milestone, I felt the invisible weight of my past slipping away, replaced by the quiet strength of someone who had fought alone and refused to break. I kept my success secret. Social media posts were vague, dinners with friends carefully curated to avoid questions, and calls home were measured. No one outside this room needed to know how much control I was quietly amassing. It was my armor, my power, and my story, and I was writing it exactly as I chose. Looking back now, I can trace every sleepless night, every self-doubt-fueled tear, and every victory that started as a whisper in a notebook gifted by my grandmother. Each step reinforced one truth: I was no longer at the mercy of anyone's judgment. I had become the architect of my own destiny, patient, calculating, and relentless. And all the while, the thought of him, the man who fired me, lingered at the edge of my mind. A reminder that sometimes the people who underestimate you give you the clearest view of your own potential. The invitation was casual, almost innocuous, a luncheon arranged under the guise of catching up. But I knew exactly what I was doing. When he walked through the glass doors of my office that morning, his eyes scanning the room, I watched every flicker of surprise before he even spoke. My old boss, the one who had fired me with such cold finality, now stood in my domain. The office was a reflection of every hard-fought step I had taken since that fateful day. Expensive abstract art lined the walls, a subtle mix of power and personal taste. Bookshelves carried titles on finance, leadership, and biographies of women who refused to be sidelined. My desk, immaculate and commanding, held a single photograph, my grandmother's worn notebook, open to a page where her words glowed with timeless wisdom. Keep your own pen ready. He didn't know where to look first. The polished wood, the view of the city skyline, the sleek leather chair behind which I now sat. I let the silence stretch, allowing the realization to settle slowly in the room. The air hummed with tension, and I could see the faint tremor in his jaw, the way his hands twitched as he gripped the leather folder he carried. I leaned back, fingers intertwined on my desk, and gave him a small, deliberate smile. "It's been a while," I said softly, the warmth in my voice contrasting with the sharpness of my intent. He nodded, hesitantly, unsure if he should greet me with familiarity or fear. Then I let him have it, the truth. "You may remember firing me 3 years ago," I continued, thinking it would set me back. That move, ironically, gave me exactly what I needed: freedom to build something stronger. Something you never imagined. His eyes widened slightly, but I didn't rush. I wanted him to feel the weight of his underestimation, to let every detail sink in. "Those investments you managed so confidently? They're under my control now. Every fund, every decision, every client, I oversee it, and I've grown them beyond anything you ever handled." For a moment he simply stared. Disbelief clouded his face, followed by a creeping shame. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then tried again, but no words seemed to fit. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. I watched him process it. The pride he once wore like armor now unraveling. And then came a flash of amazement, almost grudging respect, as he began to realize the full scale of my success. He had assumed I would crumble, that I would fade quietly into obscurity. Instead, here I was, calm, composed, in command, and unapologetically thriving. I allowed a beat of silence, letting the moment breathe, before adding softly, almost conversationally, "It's funny how life works." The same dismissal that broke me became the foundation of everything I control today. And in that room, with the sunlight glinting off the city skyline behind me, I finally felt the full weight of the journey. Every doubt, every sleepless night, every tiny triumph culminating in this exact moment. I had turned the tables completely, and he knew it. The moment of revelation had passed, but the room still hummed with tension. I stood, walking slowly around my desk, letting the soft click of my heels against the polished floor mark my presence. The shift in power was tangible. I could feel it in every corner, every glance. He had underestimated me once. He wouldn't again. I stopped near the window, letting the cityscape stretch behind me like a silent witness. "I'm not here to punish you," I began, voice steady, controlled. "But I will set the terms for how we move forward." He swallowed hard. I could see him weighing every word, every possible consequence. I leaned slightly, my gaze direct. "First, respect. Respect for the work I've done, and the authority I now hold. That means listening, collaborating, not assuming you know better than me simply because you outrank me in your own mind." He nodded slowly, but I wasn't finished. "Second, accountability. Every decision you make going forward, whether in your department or our interactions, will be transparent. No shortcuts, no cutting corners, no repeating past mistakes." I could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness in his jaw. I didn't soften. "Third, personal growth. This isn't just about business. It's about becoming someone capable of recognizing talent, lifting others up, and taking responsibility for your impact. You will seek mentorship, read, reflect, and show tangible changes in the way you approach both work and people." My voice carried a rhythm that left no room for negotiation. I could feel the weight of my years of struggle and determination settling into every word. "And lastly," I said almost gently, "if you fail to meet these conditions, the consequences will be clear. Your investments, your clients, and your opportunities will no longer be under your control. I've built this empire carefully, and I won't allow old patterns to threaten it." He exhaled, a mixture of awe, shame, and reluctant admiration in his eyes. I could see him realizing that the woman he once dismissed had become not only stronger, but indispensable. The balance had shifted, and I was the one holding the ledger of power. I stepped back to my desk, leaning lightly against the polished wood. "I'm giving you a chance," I said, voice softening, "but it's up to you to earn it. This is about more than money. It's about integrity, respect, and learning to do better. For yourself, for others, and for the work we share." As I watched him nod, the tension in the room finally easing, I felt a quiet satisfaction. This wasn't vengeance. This was justice shaped by growth, patience, and vision. I had taken control not to crush him, but to ensure that the mistakes of the past would not repeat. In that moment, I realized that power, true power, wasn't about dominance or anger. It was about clarity, principle, and the courage to define your own terms. And I was finally free to do exactly that. Weeks passed after the confrontation, and I watched subtle changes unfold. My former boss, once rigid and dismissive, began approaching decisions with care, consulting me on strategies rather than asserting authority. It wasn't instant redemption, but it was progress. Each day, I saw him shed old habits, replacing arrogance with thoughtfulness, ego with accountability. I, too, was evolving in ways I hadn't anticipated. Sitting at my desk one quiet evening, the city lights painting golden streaks across the office, I reflected on the journey, the sting of dismissal, the lonely nights, the self-doubt that threatened to pull me under. Every obstacle had been a lesson in resilience, every tear a step toward the woman I had become, strong, decisive, and unapologetically independent. The worn notebook from my grandmother sat open on the corner of my desk, its pages now filled with meticulous notes, strategies, and reflections. I touched it gently, remembering her words, "Keep your own pen ready." What once felt like simple advice had transformed into a creed I lived by. That small gift, given with love years ago, had guided me through the darkest days and helped me claim the life I deserved. Even the relationships I once feared would crumble were finding new footing. Colleagues treated me with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Clients trusted my judgment implicitly, and the people who had underestimated me were learning to see my worth. The ripple effect of my persistence was quietly transforming everything around me. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes for a moment, savoring the clarity that had taken years to achieve. The woman I had been, timid, uncertain, overlooked, was no longer who I defined myself to be. I was not defined by rejection, by dismissal, or by anyone else's narrow expectations. And in that realization, I found grace. Strength, yes, but tempered with compassion. Power, yes, but guided by principle. I smiled softly, opening my eyes to the skyline that had once seemed unreachable. I am enough, I whispered to the city, to the past, and to myself. I am more than they imagined, and I am free. The notebook remained on my desk, a quiet reminder of every step that brought me here. My journey wasn't just about controlling investments, winning battles, or proving others wrong. It was about becoming the woman I had always been meant to be, resilient, visionary, and unshakably true to herself. And with that, I knew this story was only the beginning.